Great thinking space. 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 Rated already. Great thinking space. 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 Great. Alright. Great thinking space. Great thinking space. Great thinking space. Rated already, please. Great thinking space. 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 Rated, please. Great thinking space. Great thinking. Great. Alright, rethinking space, rethinking space, rethinking space, rethinking space, rethinking space, rethinking space, rate it, please rate it. Rethinking space. Rethinking space, 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 rethinking space.
Great thinking space.